Hello everyone, and welcome to the updated YEAW rules video circa 2024, and hopefully this will last us a couple years like the other one did. So this year we're very excited to have a couple of new additions to the rule video, so we wanted to update, go through all those things, as well as a lot of the scenarios this year. Our gloves are kind of coming off a bit, so we got to make sure that everyone clearly understands the code of conduct, as well as exactly what gear values do which, clear up a couple things there, and show some bits that we've modified over the past 2 years. So we're going to go through that now, and there will also be a full write-up that is available where this is, so you'll be able to cross-check either anything we didn't cover, or alternatively, things that you need more detail in. Now, as far as partaking in YEAW, this is something that always comes up. Even though it is Huntsville Armored Weekend, you do not need armor to partake. And in fact, with some of the scenarios we're doing this year, we'd really like it if more people who didn't have armor came. All you do need is you have to be able to meet essentially the gear check for a steel longsword tournament. So Ryan here is representing that. He's got all the pieces that would be required. He's got, of course, his mask with his back of the head protector. He's got his jacket. He's got rigid forearms and elbows underneath it. He's got his heavy gloves. He's got his shins. He's got his cup. He is all good to go partake in some steel fighting. This is all you need. If you can match this gear, you are good to play. Now, currently, as far as our rule set is concerned, Ryan is standing the same as I am. None of this counts as any armor. And so any strike with any sort of weapon, as long as it's of sufficient quality, will cause him to have to step out of the scenario. Now, along with this, there's also a couple little extra specialties. So Ryan here has a very brightly colored hood, which is wonderful. We will need either a brightly colored hood like this, brightly colored tape put on top of your regular hood, or alternatively, another option would be you could use a chaperone or other sort of external hood to put over top. This is to ensure that when people are looking through essentially a mail slot, they are able to recognize, hey, this is not armor, I should not swing a poleaxe at it. So anyone who is wearing just a fencing mask will need something along those lines. And if you don't have it by the time you show up, I will put the ugliest tape I can find on it. Now, along with this as well, because he has no armor value, and we'll see this comparison in a moment, he is wearing the Spez officer jacket. Spez caftans, JF jackets, or anything else that doesn't have historical style padding will not be counted as any sort of armor, which we'll now compare against here. So now we're moving up to Pat, and Pat has the same gear as Ryan, however he has one addition, which is he is wearing a padded gambison. Now this could either be a modern AP style gambison or things along those lines, or it could be a historical gambison, as I'll show in a comparison in a moment. All of that's fine, but the idea is that now if anything lands on the gambison itself, it does have some armor value. So what this grants you is immunity to one-handed cuts. So any arming sword, any dagger, anything like that, cuts him, he's completely fine. If a two-handed cut or some of the other specialty weapons we'll get into should land upon him, then he would out. His head is still exposed, his hands are still exposed, his wrists are still exposed, but other than that, it is starting to get him a little more protection. And as far as your average combatant at YEAW, this is about what we expect most people will probably end up wearing. If you don't have a padded jacket of some sort, you may wish to consider looking into getting a couple pieces of armor to cover that. Now, could you hold your arm out for me, Pat? It's important to note, YEAW is self-judged, so of course you have to be familiar with the gear setup you're wearing. His modern forearm guards are covering his forearms, but the padded gambison is still underneath, so if something lands here, he's still okay. Something lands here, that's of course his wrist, and we will be expecting him to step out. So just pay attention to what you're wearing. Of course, anything hits his legs or whatever, he just goes ahead and steps out. So now let's go ahead and look at a historical gambison just for sake of comparison. So, for sake, some people will probably be wearing historical gambisons. I do want to clarify, you don't have to have 350 Newton or anything along those lines. What I do ask, though, is that it be of good quality. Make sure that this is not ratty or have too many holes in it or things along those lines. Well padded as well, as this is your only line of defense. And this will be kind of a case-by-case basis. So if you're unsure as to whether or not your more historical style gambison will pass, send me some pictures of it or what have you, and then day of, I will do a personal inspection to make sure that it qualifies. If it doesn't count as armor, don't take it as an offense, take it as I want you to be safe. So now we're going to start adding some more protection, and this is Harley, and let's also start talking about a couple more of how armor interacts with protected gear. The bare minimum thing about YEAW that I always want to pay the most attention to is that everyone is safe. So there are going to be some times when safety overcomes historicity and can lead to some kind of odd gear setups, but we want to make sure that no one can get hurt as a bunch of people are going to be swinging weapons at each other. So as far as the baseline is going, the main thing that Harley has added into it is she is now wearing a mail shirt. So mail shirts, or any piece of adequate mail that has to be riveted, it is immunity to all cuts. So one hand hits this mail, Harley does not care. However, armor is not cumulative. So she is wearing, for example, a padded jacket underneath the mail, but if something should hit here, the mail does not help her. So if it hits on the armor, that armor protects you. If it misses that armor, then it doesn't help you. She's also, for example, wearing a modern jacket with modern helmet with her good stripes on it to make sure no one hits her in the head. She's got her modern handguards, modern legs. And then as well, to support her jack chain setup, could you hold your arm out to the side? Perfect. We have leather arm guards that the plate is attached to. No matter how well made, we will not be counting leather as a armor value. This is just to ensure quality across the board so that everyone's on the same page. So if it's leather, it doesn't count as armor unless, of course, it's directly of a historical design with, for example, plate put into it, such as splinted arms. So this is still the same as this. Now, as far as the plate is concerned, she is wearing jack chains, which are a very simple form of armor. When it comes to things like this, again, the self-judging comes into it. As far as I'm concerned, if a blow lands partially on that jack chain and then onto her, she's still good. As far as self-call, she can keep fighting. If it misses that chain, right, hits where that armor is not, then of course that does her no good. There's going to be a couple moments where you probably should have gone out on something and you didn't, but also some ones where you went out when you probably didn't need to, so it'll even out in the wash. But let's look at a slightly more armored version of this now. So now we've added a couple more pieces. This is Cam, who is kind of serving as essentially half armor. So we've got the mail shirt, we've got the forearm guards, we've got the modern hand guards. So again, anything comes down here, he doesn't have to care. Anything comes down here, he does have to care. Now, Cam is also wearing a padded jacket, and that can be very hard for me as a person going against him to see in the moment. So if I throw a strike on his forearm, don't get mad. Don't assume that he's ignoring this. You may not be able to see what he is wearing, but all of us marshals that will be running the event should know each other and each other's armor pretty intimately. So something doesn't land here, just adjust to the next bit of plastic that you can see, and that's the safest way to go about it. The other addition, of course, is that he's got a helmet and he's got a breastplate. So when it comes to plate like this is immunity to everything except for a blow of a heavy weapon. So that'd be our poleaxes or our halberds, and we'll get into a little more detail about that in the weapons section. Those won't generally be striking at chests, not in this level of gear. But certainly now that he's got that helmet on, he is susceptible to someone choosing to go through that helmet. His helmet is also open face, which, depending upon your familiarity with armor, can be a little bit tricky to notice. Basically, look for these smaller perforations like this is what you're looking for. So anything hits here, it's the same as hitting anywhere else on armored. But if it lands here or on the plate, he no longer needs to care. Likewise, as far as self-calling, if something lands kind of here, could you turn your head to me, Cam? If something lands kind of like this, where it's hitting as much of the cheek plate as it does the open face, of course we know his face is a little deeper in there, that would be a self-call moment. I'm okay with people going out on that, but I'm also okay with people sticking in it, especially if it's something small like a sword or what have you. You can go ahead and face front again. Now, along with this, we need to make sure that people are safe, so we need to make sure there's no gaps that stuff can get up under. I don't care how beautiful your helmet is or what other sorts of things it clears. If I can get my fingers up in there and touch flesh, it will not pass my gear check. I want to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible. So Cam is wearing a padded hood that covers that gap. Likewise, that does mean that if someone cuts him there, he's okay. Someone stabs him there, it'll go right through. So go ahead and turn around for me, Cam. Another important thing to look for is that you're playing armor as worn. So I see he's armored from the front. If I can try to get to his side, that's all just mail. That's a lot easier to deal with. And he has no armor on his legs, so that's simpler for me to hit. And basically, going to face front again, if you're going up against a guy like this, you should try and weigh your odds. Do you have the amount of armor to tango with this person? Or would it be better served if you were to direct your attention elsewhere? So, Another common chest protector that we will be seeing is people wearing Brigs. As far as our melee rules are concerned, going up against other hand weapons, Brig counts the same as plate as long as it is of good historical construction. Can't just tape pieces of plate to yourself. It has to be recognizable, well-made Brigandine. So, looking for things like this that are nice and protective. But of course, it's a little more malleable, so this will matter later when we go and talk about how archery interacts with it. But for now, as far as you are going up against other hand weapons, Brig is the exact same as plate. So now we come to our most heavily armored of combatants, and joining me for this is Angela. And we do have some specific rules in regards to this, but first let's just go over pure armor value. If you, who are dressed as, let's say, Ryan or Pat were, run into this, you should run the other way. It's not that you don't have a decent chance, it's that that's a lot of armor to get through, and depending upon what weapon you're carrying, probably not even worth the effort. So, of course, being more covered in plate, this grants her immunity to a lot more of the shots. Trying to go against this with a sword, probably not in your best interest. Spear, you have a decent chance, and we will have a couple different kinds of armor running around in the field. As with the original year, we're going anywhere from about 1450 to about 1590, 1580. So if you have a lovely 1600s kit, talk to me, but generally speaking, I'm expecting most people to fall within that range. And that's not too bad, of course. Angela here is standing more on the early side of the 1410s, late 1300s, so still decent amount of mail is exposed. Plate is relatively minimal, but still protecting all the key important places. Now, as far as her playing, what she needs to focus on here is that something going into that mail, I want armor to matter. So we're looking for a good thrust, which I'll go over more detail later. Just light touches are really not something I want a person like this going out on. But likewise, as far as dealing with this, once again, play to where the armor is not. Could you hold up your hands palm forward? Bare palms. That counts exactly the same as unarmored. You can get into there and get a touch there, she will have to go out. Likewise as well, her shins are just leather protectors. She has no greaves. You can hit there, you can get rid of it, get into the forearms, into behind the gauntlets, places like that. Those are not all that well protected. Likewise, could you about face for me, Angela? Again, go where the armor is not. Most setups don't have that much armor on the back, or likewise, they won't have that much armor on the legs, though we will talk about how to take this target again in just a moment. Go ahead and face forward again, Angela. Now, for specifics as far as your armor passing gear check, I require a couple hard things. Number one is that all of your armor has to be in good condition, not too much rust, not too many dents, well attached to you, well fitting, so it's not going to fall off and isn't doing you any favors. So for example, if your legs fit okay, but when you move, they move away from your leg, I will not be accepting that because I don't want you getting hurt by your own harness. Likewise, I require that your throat be particularly well covered. So Angela here has a little vent tail that's protecting her, but also more mail underneath. So again, I can't get my finger up in there and touch her face. Chin straps are not required, but it's not a terrible idea if your helmet has one. If your helmet doesn't, if it doesn't fit you perfectly, you may wish to look into that. As well as with eye slits, they need to be small enough that I can't get a pencil through there. If they're wide enough that I can, then you'll need perforated plate in the visor, but as far as this one's concerned, it's okay. Now, in regards to other sorts of things, you're all going to be specifically tested, wherein I will personally hit you with a poleaxe and show you about what I want you to go out of if a hit lands. As far as landing on other parts of you, because these are the people that are really more afraid of getting beaten with heavy weapons, it's kind of up to you. If it lands on the forearm or on the shoulder or something like that, you can call it as you will, but as far as our combatants, when you're going up against your peerage, if you're an armor killer and you go up against someone this armored, you can play a little bit more like the historical stuff, but as far as I can't tell if that's good arm harness, or in this case, Angela's floating, let's not direct at her arms, let's go for the head. That's the safer target anyway. So, as far as our full armored people, this is about what we're expecting. If you have any questions about things like that, reach out to me. And likewise, if you are intending on playing in full armor, please send me a picture of your kit well ahead of the event, so if you need to make any changes, you will not need to make them day of. So, in regards to helmets as well, when it comes to aventails, I am requiring that aventails be backed by some form of cloth or padding. This can either be part of the liner, Or alternatively, if you have one that is already sufficiently lined, you will need to add some form of cloth backing underneath your oven tail to ensure that nothing can get through. This is non-negotiable. I do not want any loose mail that can still get pushed up against someone and open skin. So as I am showing now, this is sort of fine where the helmet has its own liner and then we've added this padding, versus something more along the lines of this would not be sufficient and you will need to add some padding to it. So as far as weapons go, we have a vast variety that are allowed. We are doing a couple changes though to how things have been in the past. If you want all the specifics of what brands are allowed, what brands are not allowed, besides what I cover here, do check the write-up to make sure everything passes gear inspection. But the most important rule for all of our melees, synthetic only. You will not be allowing any steel on the field. This includes daggers. So only synthetic to make sure that everyone is as safe as they can possibly be. We're going to start with the heavies and work our way down to the lights. So as far as heavy weapons go, these are the dedicated armor killers. All of these will be marked with red tape on or near the head. These are also only allowed to be carried by people who we have determined are safe with them. I don't care if you personally own it. If you can't pass my check, you are not allowed to use it. They also are only allowed to be carried and used by people who have a helmet themselves. So if you, for whatever reason, cannot wear a helmet, but you have this, no dice. You need to make sure you can do unto others as would be done to you. All of these are perfectly acceptable. Like I said, if you want to look at the specific brands, that's fine. The main things that make an armor killer is density of the head and then length of the haft. So for example, this one here on the end is not all that dense of a head. However, because of the length of the haft that it's been put onto, it does become just a little bit unsafe for using for its other purpose. In regards to these Purple Heart kind of original poleaxe trainers, we ask that people be very careful with them. They are still allowed, but they are the densest head that we have on the field. So we want to make sure people are nice and safe. Moving forward, then we have our medium class of polearms. These are Volges and other sorts of things like this. These I don't expect to see a ton of other than armor killers that were deemed too light to actually be felt through armor. These will be marked with yellow, more than this, yellow tape at or near the head. These are allowed to cut at mail. They do not kill plate, but are meant to even things out a little bit in some of our lighter scenarios. Again, we prefer that only people who we can trust with them are carrying them. They are still perfectly capable of poking, and so they should really be used for that. They just get a new option. These last class of polearms, in regards to cutting at least, are our axes. These function exactly the same as a longsword does under the rule set. They will be marked with blue tape near on the head. These can be carried by anyone. They have no armor killing value other than what a longsword does, i.e. it can go through a gambison because it's a two-handed cut. These have no mail capability, and since they also can't thrust, they're really only good for killing chaff. Now as far as spears go, Purple Heart heads that are dense like this work pretty well. We've also got a head here from Black Fencer. That works all right. These are all completely fine. If you have questions about the spearhead you want to bring, just reach out. There are a couple that are widely available, but just get torn up when we do too much armor. If need be, at the end here we have this butt cap. A butt cap is not required, but this style, this rounded style, is acceptable as being a spearhead in its own rights, as long as the people who use it are being safe. Now when it comes to sidearms, longswords, any Penty style or Red Dragon slash whatever style is perfectly fine. I don't care about length. I just care that, of course, if it has bear style crop piece, make sure there's some thrust over it. These will be completely fine and anyone can carry them. Same thing with the single-handed swords. We are allowing sabers once again. For example, this is obviously a much later period saber, but it's okay. As long as you can fit a heavy in there, you're fine. I don't have any side swords, but those will also be fine as long as you can fit a spez heavy into the handguard or whatever your equivalent is. Hand axes were used responsibly last year, so we're allowing them again. This style from the Purple Heart, as well as this from Descendant Leather, or this is an Arkham head. These are all okay. We ask the people who use them be very careful. These are the only single-handed weapon that can kill a gambison, which we'll go over more in the do's and do nots. They are allowed to be carried though. Daggers, again, no steel, so either wood or synthetic. Anyone's allowed to carry a dagger. Hopefully they don't end up having to get deployed all that much. Now as far as going into shields and things of the like. We are allowing center grip and strap style shields, and I don't of course have every single type pictured. Steel or synthetic for bucklers is a-okay. We ask that they just not be too crazy large. In the past we've not allowed Dark Age style shields. I am allowing them this year as long as they are no larger than 32 inches in diameter. So if it's 32-inch center grip shield, I'm accepting that for some of our lightly armored scenarios. Other than that, if you want to carry a buckler, you are more than welcome to. You are allowed to wear a lighter glove when you do so, but with the specific understanding that if you lose your shield or have to drop your shield, you are immediately exiting the field since you do not have a heavy hand on your left or shield arm. As far as strap shields go, we're allowing things like this is a Targe. You could also have a heater shield or something else along those lines, just as long as it's able to be carried. That's completely acceptable, as are steel or synthetic if you want to, rotellas. Those are also fine. There are a couple little specific rules about using these that we'll bring up. And for some scenarios when it comes to shields like this, I will ask that people gravitate toward pole arms just because of what we're trying to accomplish. But do not worry, it's been long awaited. This year, you will get to use your shields a bit more than last time. So, now we get into the do's and do nots, and this is relatively common sense, nothing too complicated. And again, more clarity, read through the rules. This is give the visual representation of do's and don'ts. And joining me again is Pat, who I've given something to feel better. So, as far as him goes, if we fight each other, it's not dissimilar to any time you'd go up against someone in a normal tournament. So, the only thing I have to pay attention to is his armor value. So I cut him here, he goes away. I cut him here, he doesn't go away, because that's on his gambison. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. Now, that doesn't mean that you can try and hit harder to get people to go away. I should not try and bully Pat enough that he goes, ow, and leaves. If you do that, I'm going to be very upset with you. Instead, has to go out on that. Nice and simple. But above, again, target the places where the armor is not, and things will be relatively straightforward. The only addition to this is when it comes to little weapons. So let me grab those now and we'll go through that. So, as far as specialty things, like I talked about and as is in the write-up, single-handed axes can kill a gambison. Now, what that means is that if I go up against Pat, I can hit him where I want. These are heavier though, so be nicer when you do it. Most of the time the shot ends up going to the head anyway though, so it's really just a occasionally comes up sort of thing. Generally speaking, most people are going to be armed probably with a single-handed sword, or there may even be some long swords in the field, in which case, two-handed cut, he's gone, end of story. But again, thrust is really what you should be expecting to do. If you're close enough that you can cut at each other, things have probably gone very, very wrong. Along with this as well, like I talked about, axes marked with blue act the same as a longsword, so that will go through his gambison and Pat will go away. Shields are going to be involved in some of the scenarios a little more, and there are some specific rules that I am going to be very, very on about. So number one, no striking with your shield. Boss or edge, don't do it. Accidents happen. If I'm and run into this, that's on me, not him. But we want to try and mitigate that as much as possible. Be cautious. And so in some scenarios, if I know people are going to get tightly packed, I may actively tell people, hey, no shield on this one. It's for safety. Likewise, if we come to a grapple, his arm is literally strapped. I should not grab and try to wrench. That can cause a lot of horrible damage to his elbow. We don't want to be doing that. So if you got to get a shield out of the way, push it instead if you can. Likewise, wrap shots are strictly banned. If you don't know what wrap shot is, that's the idea of Pat's covering himself so well with a shield I can't hit anything. So I try to bring this around to touch him on the far end. Not allowed. Not to the head, not to the body, not to the leg. I do not want to see this sort of thing at all, period. I see it once, you get a warning. I see it again, you are done. This includes, likewise, if you end up in a grapple with someone and you're trying to desperately cut them, I'm counting this sort of stuff as a wrap shot too. The correct answer is counter grapple them and try to stab them. None of this, regardless of armor level. So now, as far as utilizing spears, and so we're using Harley for this, who's kind of a mix of gear levels. When it comes to just thrusting at normal gear, it doesn't have to be that much, you know? That's enough. She knows to go out, right? Likewise to an unarmored target, she knows to go out. If you are up against someone who's in, you know, a gambison or whatever, flung thrusts are permitted. So I do something like that, she goes out on it. However, people tend to start to gravitate to these. No flung thrusts at the face. That's never a good idea. If you're gonna flung thrust, make sure it's at center mass preferably, and if she's in mail, then I shouldn't even bother. She's in mail, she feels that, doesn't matter how hard it was, she can ignore it, laugh at me, and come hit me. What I do need to get through mail is I need movements. That means either I am pressing and pushing, or alternatively, I am just thrusting with enough structure that she feels to move. So particularly when you're going against someone who has, plate and center mass, if you can get that shoulder to turn, that's good. Likewise, if you're going for the hips or things along the lines, can you lift your arm slightly? There we go. That sort of depression is what we're looking for. You don't have to be crazy hard. You just need to actually be behind your weapon. It's not all that difficult to achieve. You are allowed to use the other end to push someone away from you or to get some sort of clearance. However, you're not allowed to strike with it. If in the midst of a melee you end up kind of like this, where it's like a pommel strike, if she wants to go out on that, that's completely understandable, and that's fine, but I don't really want people to be going for them because that gets dangerous real fast. Now, going up a layer of armor, and this is this isn't new, we did this last year, but just for sake of clarity, this is a medium polearm. This doesn't kill plate, but can kill mail. So, if we run across each other, ideally I can still just stab her, it's still got a point, works exactly the same as a spear, and if she was less armored than she is now, I would only be stabbing with this weapon. But in some of our scenarios, there will be more lightly armored people against this. This is now considered pretty heavy armor. So, only in this situation am I allowed to cut to the mail. Not to the head, to the mail. So if I'm going to poke her in the head, I should just poke her, right? But if I want to cut that mail, I am free and clear to do so. And we will be making that a big part of the calibration class, day of. You'll get experience, you'll get used to it. But for the most part, again, the thrust is the key thing. This is just to give someone who's pretty well armored something a little bit extra to fear. Now we are against our most heavily armored opponent, and this is where some other important things come in. So number one as well, more likely when two armored people come up, do swords end up mattering a bit more because we've lost our primary weapons, we're close. So let's also go over how swords kill mail. It's the same as the spear, and same as that has been every single year. I need two hands on the blade to get through mail. So this is plenty fine, and again, I'm looking for movement. Justice, this is plenty fine, but she doesn't have to care, right? And likewise, again, no wrap shots, no nonsense like that. Though having said that, in this situation, if I can cut the front of her leg, that'd be fine. Good luck pulling that off in a melee, right? Instead, like I said, you're focused on just trying to get through that mail if you can, if you're using any sort of thrusting weapon. Likewise, as is in the write-up, but I'll briefly go over, as I am dressed right now, I'm representing an unarmored or lesser armored person. I am not allowed to grapple her at the body. So I cannot go up and go take hold of her because that is not going to turn out very well. However, do you have your spear toward me? I am allowed to grab her weapon. I am even allowed to fully ditch my weapons to grab hers in hope that I can either disarm her or that someone else will come and get her. That's completely fine. Now in the situation, Angela, could you draw your dagger? I'll hold on to this, if you can. There you go.
Thank you.
So in the situation, I'm feeling a lot safer. Can't even get out. But in this scenario, I'm lightly armored and a knight has come forward and put a dagger at me. Again, I am allowing, go ahead and stab, right? Can fight at the dagger itself. However, if your defense requires you to come to grip, out of there, anyone in armor, you shouldn't try to be in this scenario if you can. If it happens, we'll work case of, but again, do not grapple with someone more armored than you. You don't have a breastplate, can't grapple people with breastplates. You don't have a helmet, don't grapple people without helmets, right? Just always go to your tier and not below, and not above either. Now, the only other specialty thing here is that if I am dedicated armor killer, I have a weapon that can do it, which is marked in red. What you're looking for is predominantly, thrust is better than cut. Every time we do YEAW, people get a little bit over fixated on being, the bonkers, and that's great, but that's a hard way to drop somebody. A lot of things can go wrong. I could hit with the haft. I could hit and skip off. I can miss entirely and end up tangling people over. I really would encourage people that of the two options, stabbing someone drops them a lot faster than beating them to death, even if you're good at it. But in this scenario, what we're looking for is you must have one hand in the middle of the haft. This is strictly disallowed, and if I see it, you get a warning. I see it again, you're not touching an axe again. In the middle or in the middle, both of those are fine. Obviously, a little bit more like this is still okay too. And what we're looking for is just a dense hit that she can acknowledge and leave. Again, we'll have the calibration class, and I will personally hit every single person in a helmet with this so they understand exactly what I am looking for. Now, important scenario. Turn around for me. You come up behind someone. How do you hit them? How do you acknowledge they're out? What I don't want to see, turn a little bit more to your right. There we go. What I don't want to see is people coming up and doing this, even lightly. No. You're behind someone. Poke them in the back. And if you can't hit them in the back because they've got a full chess player or something like that, the leg, or one of the best place, get them right in the butt. Ain't nobody who's not even going to pause if you do this, right? This is what I want to do if you get behind someone. I don't want to see this at all. But otherwise, though, plays out pretty much the same as our normal Armor is Worn rules. So once again, we'll be having the archery as well, and I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate this on Angela because one of our scenarios heavily involves people in armor getting shot. So this is our Dorp arrow. It's exactly the same as last year. We will probably change the fletching, but otherwise it's exactly the same idea. These are safe to get hit with even if you are in just fencing gear. I won't say it's pleasant, but it's not the end of the world. The basic way that this breaks down is if it hits plate, you don't care. And for the most part, when these fly, they hit plate, they'll skip off or they'll just bounce off. You really don't have to worry much. If it hits your mail, you go out. If you are wearing a Brigandine, it hits that, you go out. Anything flexible, even though it's plate, an arrow will be counted as going through. On the day of, if you have, for example, a solid breastplate and then the rest of your setup is brig, that will be different. Hits that solid breastplate, you don't care. Likewise, I encourage people to kind of play toward, realism. If, for example, Angela had articulated arms, or even with her floating arms, if it hits kind of on that corner, that's gonna dent the metal, and that's going to affect the way that she can move. If you get hit there, you might consider stepping out on that, or alternatively, if you get hit there more than once, you might consider stepping out on that. But otherwise, these just work pretty much the same as they did last year. If you're unarmored and it hits you, tough luck, you die. If it hits you in the mail, tough luck, you die. Hits you in the plate, you can walk that off. So that is our do's and do nots, our equipment regulations, and our weapon regulations. Anything that I didn't cover in here or that you need on can be found in the write-up that will be attached where you find this video, as well as this video will, of course, be buried in the rulebook, so you'll be able to find it itself. If you have any questions or particulars like that, reach out to me directly, and I will be happy to answer them. I'm looking forward to this year's YEAW. There's going to be a lot of really cool stuff going on, and some of our scenarios are a lot more complicated than we've done in the past, so there may be a smaller production video that comes out soon that explains some of those things. But for now, at least, that's most of what you need to know to come play. Remember, armor or no armor, you can absolutely come do it. It's just a bit pay to win the more you get into it. So, thank you very, very much. And I look forward to seeing you on the field in November.